All right. Hello and welcome to the Sac Off podcast. We have returned after it's been a long break with classes and technology issues and all that. It's been too long of a break. I mean, when we
The
were last on,
the Kings are resting players, so we can have a rest too.
yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, we built up injuries along the year, and we just needed time to rest. And George Karl wasn't in favor of us. It's just one of those things. And now we're here, and I mean, last time we talked, it was a lot about George Karl and how he was still the Kings coach. And now, as of like an hour and a half ago, breaking news, in case no one was expecting this, which I guess ESPN wanted to run with it like it was breaking news. George Karl is fired. He is no longer the Kings coach. That contract has been terminated.
Who would
So,
have
my
thought?
good friend, Oscar, how are you feeling now that George Karl is gone? The King is dead. The King is dead.
Well, I mean, I was expecting it, so it's not really a surprise. It was just what time on Thursday, not if it was Thursday. I think we kind of knew that since he didn't get fired the last time. So it'll be interesting now, kind of like which other coaches get fired, and we see kind of how many candidates are out there, and see who. It's already kind of seeing the candidates getting banded about already, and like the vertical articles just saying all these coaches will have interviews, but they're not going to accept it because the Kings. So that stuff's going to be fun for the next however many days this takes.
Yeah, the vertical. I mean, just reading that this morning, how they had some interesting stuff about like King assistant coaches weren't able to eat
Have
certain
breakfast.
things for breakfast, and I mean,
I guess they got to save some money because they knew they were firing Karl pretty early on in the season.
yeah, that's just Also, there's going to be a lot of reports coming out. I mean, you had the one I forgot. Oh man, I'm forgetting the name, but he's talking about how Vlade was seriously pushing for Karl to be fired during the All-Star break, but minority owners were saying no. And now he finally got his way. And now, for the first time since Vivek Randive has been the owner, the general manager gets to pick his coach. It's a novel idea that they're going to test out.
Well, Pete D'Alessandro picked his coach. It's just Pete D'Alessandro was also getting fired a month later.
Well,
So,
yeah.
so we did have a general manager pick their coach. It just happened that the general manager was out the door.
Yeah, and that was Mark Stein who reported, just to give credit, because we're all about giving credit here.
And Mark Stein's normally pretty right on stuff. And I think we knew that as well. Like that was the reason why there was lots of reports saying that Karl's getting fired, and then there was reports straight after saying he's not now because minority owners. And it is a lot of money for, like, I guess the reasoning is like you're saving what I think it's like 10 million by not firing him then, and if the season's already over, maybe the minority owners also want to like tank as well. But I guess like credit to Vlade is like it was probably the worst season you could imagine in terms of like player coach dynamic, and they still beat the Vegas over under. So
Yeah.
like as much as like this has been like a terrible season, like there's still enough talent there to, and even like talent that wasn't playing, um, and that's kind of a Karl issue. Even these like this last month or so when they're playing for nothing, like Willie Cauley-Stein having like 5 or so games of 5 minutes is just appalling. But obviously Karl just didn't care about the future of this team anymore, and he was wanting to play Quincy AC all the time. So maybe AC was sliding him some checks to get his career stats up.
Yeah, I mean,
I love Quincy though. He was good. He played well.
yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, I mean, before the season, we were so damn optimistic, and that was crushed quickly. But I mean, like, you look at this, like, there was talent there. I mean,
They still
granted,
made me a lot of money
yeah,
covering the over.
George Karl kept some of the talent on the bench sometimes because they didn't meet the age requirement. I mean, they won 32, 33 games. Just, I mean, you look at all the fourth quarter collapses they had. I mean, it could have been better. And granted, there's going to be this dysfunction, but I mean, looking at the roster, if let's say Seth Curry opts and you have Darren Collison, Rudy Gay, Willie Cauley-Stein. Oh my goodness, I love him. DeMarcus Cousins, and we'll talk about draft pick situation later. But there's talent there to win some games. You just need a coach who actually knows what he's doing, is willing to play talented players.
I think it's more you need a coach that's willing to set their ego aside if their own scheme doesn't fit the personnel perfectly, and that's something we didn't see with George Karl. Instead, they made up that DeMarcus Cousins is a better perimeter player than a post-up player, which is just ludicrous to say about one of the best post-up players of this generation, to say he's a better perimeter player. And like, he is a phenomenal perimeter player. Like, his crossovers and driving to the rim is like really hard to stop, but it doesn't create an efficient basketball, or and it just he got really hurt just having to drive and flying to the floor all the time. Maybe he's getting banged up a bit more if he's on the block, but at least it's not him flying onto the floor a load. And just the off-ball movement, there was really little of it. It's all just coming off pin down screens the whole time. That was kind of it. So we'll see kind of who comes in and then what that means for players like Rondo. I would imagine if it's a coach that's not going to give him much freedom, that he won't come back. But that's also kind of my biases of not wanting him back. And Darren Collison, especially these last couple of weeks, has looked phenomenal. And they even had to bench him the last game just so the Kings wouldn't win.
Yeah, I'll get, because there's been rants I've been saying, but with Darren Collison, my one hope is this doesn't turn into an Isaiah Thomas situation where every year they're trying to replace him in the offseason, put him back on the bench. But I don't know. It feels like that could end up happening again.
I think Vlade will like that. He is he's one of the most passionate players and really optimistic. So I think Vlade will like that. And he seems, and you saw when Malone had Darren Collison, he really took to Collison being a leader. And there was times when after wins, Malone would go up to Collison as way to run your team, and gave him ownership. So I think if you can find another coach as good as Malone, or just Malone is, I think Malone is the personality you kind of need, where he'll take the bullets for players and then the players will die for him. And yep. That's kind of the opposite of what we had with Karl, where Karl would just throw shit at the players the whole time, not take any responsibility, and then if any of them talked back to him, gave him the same treatment back, then they would be in shit. So there's just a one-way street of respect. So
I think you've done something great there, because I'm with George, and this, I think this is what a lot of players appreciate and respected from Malone, is in the media he would take responsibility. Behind closed doors, he would confront players or criticize them when it needed to be done. George Karl was the opposite of that. He would throw players under the bus. He would call them out for every which way things that weren't.
And when they had a good game, they would make excuses as why it wasn't them, it was someone else. It's always system, it's something.
And it would always be done in the media, and it wouldn't be on him. And again, his ego got in the way, and really that's kind of why you see he's isolated. He was isolated from players, and the locker room turned on him. And it's probably why he should have gotten rid of sooner, but that's for another.
He never had the locker room for it to turn on him. He needed to try to get the locker room first before you then try all these things. And it's interesting because in the preseason, he was always talking about positive energy, but then the way he talks is always negatively.
And he started the negative stuff from day one with Willie Cauley-Stein and DeMarcus. It was a relationship doomed to fail.
Shall we move on to talking about some potential hiring names then?
Yeah, for sure. Just real quickly, I just want to say this to the Sacramento Bee, and specifically a few writers. It is deplorable how much you let your bias get in the way. Andy Ferrillo, for you to, obviously he's not listening, but for Gerald,
you can send him the link. You can send him the link.
There we go. But for you, for your bias to get so much in the way that you advocate, and you first of all, you call out as DeMarcus Cousins work ethic, saying in tough times, others work hard, he pouts, he quits, and everything. But for you to say the Kings should release DeMarcus Cousins, it's the best move for the team. That is just absolutely asinine, and it shows how much you let your bias take over. You threw objectivity out the window, and the absolute defense you continuously throw for George Karl, making him to be the victim in all this. And there is no victim in this situation, but for you to do that is just, it goes against what being a journalist is supposed to be. And yet you get it right in the newspaper every day. I just don't understand it. And just, Andy Ferrell, you are terrible at your job.
I hate the idea that, oh, this coach has won a lot, so it can't be him, instead of like actually looking at the individual situation and weighing everything by its merits.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why I don't really read op-ed journalism, because it's very rarely good. Pretty much the only people I read about the Kings are Aaron Bruschi, James Ham, and Jason Jones, and Sean's video work for News 10. That's about it. There's no one else really worth a damn.
Yeah, it's probably a good call. Yeah. Anyways, so that was my small rant that I've been saving. My continued fuming issues with the Sacramento Bee, which, by the way, Sacramento Bee, I still want to job.
Jones is good.
Yeah, Jason Jones. I like him. I like the work he does. He's respected, and so Jason Jones, we love you, just in case you're listening, which you're probably not, but in case you are, I
think he's on a flight, given his recent tweets. So should we move on to some head coaching candidates then?
Sure.
So shall we start with like the big names that have been linked, which I think are the Tibbs, Kevin McHale, and Mark Jackson, Vinny Del Negro. Anyone else I'm missing?
Let's see who else. Mark Jackson. I'm trying to think if there anyone else.
Should we start with Tibbs first? Because I think he's would be kind of the ideal thing, and maybe he would even work if you keep Rondo, just because they've had that history together. Obviously, when he was in a defensive assistant with the Celtics, when Rondo was there, I guess he would be interesting, just because he's a no bullshit guy, which I think players like Boogie would really take to. Also, just like someone who's defensive minded, and as we've seen the last couple of years, like offensively, this team can even score with no offense. So I think it's to put a priority on defensive system would be nice. It was also nice to be seeing Kings running some ice as well, instead of just switching everything. At least, and because we're going to pretty much see the same roster again, just adding a rookie and hopefully taking away a Rondo, and probably adding maybe another wing or a big. We'll see whether it's Ryan Anderson or whoever comes over. But it'll be interesting. I know there's been some reporting that Tibbs wants some personnel control. So whether Vlade would give that up, and then also with allegedly bringing in a GM below him, who's not really a GM, but kind of like what the Dolphins have at the moment in Chris Greer, where he's called the GM, but really Tannenbaum's running the show. So then maybe that would be too many different people to kind of divvy up power to. But you never know. I mean, maybe Tibbs would like to work for like a former player, where it's all about just like what's on the court and none of the politics that he had to go through with the Bulls. So you can never really tell how a coach is going to operate. And Tibbs did spend a week in Sacramento with the Kings, so at least he's been around them and can see how they practice and would have seen the new stadium and stuff like that. So maybe that could help. But he's been to a lot of teams this year, kind of looking around.
Yeah, I think one thing mentioned with the GM position is, I forgot the name, but the Kings are looking at the Atlanta. Is it Hawks assistant GM?
Former Bucks.
Former Bucks.
So he was around when they drafted Giannis, and so that could maybe make sense.
Yeah. So this is from. Oh, yeah. Anyways, but yeah, so let's talk about that and bringing additional help. But I mean, situation itself is interesting. Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on Tibbs, or did I kind of cover it all? Do you want to move on to someone else?
I think you covered it well with Tibbs. I mean, the one thing is I just love so much is just him being able to work with Willie Cauley-Stein.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Because he could maybe like make him more of a playmaker like Taj. And then he's obviously like had Taj when he was more athletic and could just run down the floor. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
And Noah as well. Maybe Noah's like Noah's playmaking that I kind of meant. And then like Boogie can kind of do some of those like handling at the elbow and have like handoffs come off him. So that'd be kind of interesting.
I'm trying to pull up the quote now because Thibodeau talked about DeMarcus Cousins in a fairly recent interview and talked about working with him. So they have a relationship there as well.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And then there'll be Team USA, which Thibs is involved with. So obviously he'll get to spend some time with Boogie and Gay, or at least be watching Boogie and Gay quite a lot for Team USA. So then that's kind of like a nice parallel. He must have been with Team USA last offseason as well, when both Gay and Boogie were there at that kind of like open scrimmage. So that's kind of another interaction they've had with him. So that's all kind of, I think, a good thing. And we've seen with a couple of coaches having a year off is kind of helps them kind of look at the state of the league and adjust slightly, although that didn't happen with the last coach we hired.
Yeah, and you mentioned the year off. It's another coach that there's been some talk about, Scott Brooks. I mean, obviously with Scott Brooks, one thing is, he knows Sacramento extremely well. He spent a lot of time here before he became an assistant coach. So, I mean, kind of a homecoming in a way, because he spent, I'm trying to find out how many years. I forgot how many years. But yeah, he spent a lot of his time in Sacramento. So it'd be that. And yeah, so from, he was 2006 to 7, so he's with the Kings as an assistant. But I mean, he does have that connection with young players, being able to develop them. So there is some intriguingness there. But I mean,
but the Kings aren't going to have many young players to develop. Is kind of the issue, where you're going to have Willie, Ben, and a rookie. No one else is going to be under 23, and then you might not have a pick next year, or the next year. So, one of the next 2 years, you're probably not going to have a pick if it goes to the Bulls next year again. Then it's in 3 years, so maybe that'll be fine. I think with Brooks, he'll be someone who we're trying to like, okay, we'll give him 3 years, hoping he would develop some guys, start getting the team to the playoffs, and then we'll look to like build off that foundation and like create some stability. So I wouldn't hate it. I'm not a fan of his offense, but at least he would put it in the hands of DeMarcus Cousins a lot to isolate, which is not a bad thing, but there'll be the risk of it. ISOs with Rudy Gay and whoever, and if Rondo has it, it'll just be Rondo holding the ball for 15 seconds and then throwing it somewhere. So that has some issues as well.
I don't remember who I was talking to. It was on Twitter about Brooks, but basically, for me, why I like him is he's the guy. I mean, he can develop some young players, but he's the guy who helps you take that step forward. He's not going to help you take 2-3 steps forward, but take that one big step forward. You're close to a playoff contender, just making it. And then with your pieces developed, your core in place, then you look for that next big guy who can take you.
Kind of what the magic we're hoping will happen with Scott Skiles.
Yeah.
Should we move on to Kevin McHale? I think would be interesting in terms of like, he's obviously a well-respected big man as a player. As a coach, is like, even though he was like a post-minded player, he adapted to the analytics of the free and rim shots that obviously I think the Kings would like to implement. They've talked about it a lot. Obviously, hiring George Karl was kind of an indication of that, even though they don't really shoot many threes, which is they were just trying to get to the rim the whole time. So then maybe he would be able to kind of combine those two things. So having the knowledge of being a big man, someone that Boogie can will respect, like, Boogie knows like everything about the NBA. He's like a historian, like loves the game and like older players. He can talk about anyone. So he'll be interested in that regard of kind of like a hybrid of like modern and post play. And then like he would obviously likes to run and have guys trailing. So I think that would work well with Caspi and Willie Cauley-Stein. So I think he would be a really interesting addition. You could even say like Willie Cauley-Stein is similar to Capella as well, just kind of like long dangly, runs around, flies about, blocks stuff. So it'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, and one thing I was just checking is I'm doing with all these coaches now is typing in Kevin McHale calls out, see if he's called out any players in the media.
I think he called out the Rockets yesterday or something, didn't he? There was some
he called out the Rockets, and I guess in February he talked about James Harden being overweight. That's when he was
overweight.
So yeah,
that's a fair. That I think that's not calling out. That's just factual.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's a line between like calling out when stuff's bad and just even when a player's played well, like ripping them.
Yeah.
So, are we really going to talk about Vinny Del Negro and Mark Jackson, or are we just going to pray it never happens? Mark Jackson had that.
I'll just say this. It was really nice to see him at the Kings' final game at Arco Arena on Saturday. It's nice for him to be there supporting his old team and seeing him on the court. But he shouldn't be an NBA head coach. I'm not sure he should be a college head coach. But if the Kings hire him, oh, please just don't do that, Sacramento. Please don't. No, don't do that.
And I kind of don't think the Kings would sign Mark Jackson as well, just because of Vivek being part of the Golden State Warriors and kind of knowing about all that turmoil that was going on, even though they did bring him in for a meeting with DeMarcus Cousins before they hired George Karl, or when they fired Malone. I think it was around then. But maybe that meeting's been overstated more than it was, as it was around a game where he was calling. So yeah, I would kind of hope he wouldn't come in either. Should we go to kind of some of the smaller names, or is there anyone bigger you wanted to touch on first?
No, I think those are the major names that have been thrown out. Although I mean, if the rumors are true about, this, I mean, obviously there's dysfunction in Sacramento, we know that, but if it's radioactive enough to where some of the bigger names that are going to stay away go for more established positions, then I think you'll look more towards the assistant coaching ranks and the college coaching ranks.
Should we talk about David Blatt first?
Yeah.
Because I think he'd be interesting just in terms of fit with DeMarcus Cousins as a player. I don't know, maybe like off the field, how that fit would be. But as a player, I think the Princeton system and DeMarcus as that kind of post playmaker, post elbow playmaker with just guys, lots of motion around him, would be really fun and open up the paint a lot for everyone. And so I think that would be like a really fun scheme. I think Collison would fit in it really well. Not so sure if Gay would, but we'll see. I guess he's kind of getting to the later part of his career now where he's going to be kind of less of a role. Maybe he could be kind of like more of a just play the four. Although he struggled more playing the four this year than he did last year, but he was kind of playing at different spots on the floor. And not like, so that'll be kind of interesting. We'll see kind of where that goes. Personality wise, maybe it's not the best fit to go with someone that's kind of struggled with locker room and has that kind of stigma. But on the court, I think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, well, one other thing, I mean, because obviously, so David Blatt, I mean, the one connection there would also be because obviously David Blatt coaching overseas in Israel.
Yeah, so Caspi.
Omri Caspi. And, I mean, who knows, maybe.
And Caspi's BFFs with Boogie, so that's nice.
Yeah. Caspi, Blatt, and Cousins. They all go to Israel for a visit this offseason.
Oh, yeah, that'd be lovely.
Yeah. Be a good bond.
Yeah. get all muddy.
Yeah.
So I think we can put that one on pen then.
Yeah, there we go. There you go, King. Vladi, we made the decision for you.
Should we move on to, I guess, like the other sexy European name? Messina, the Spurs assistant. Before that, he had coached Moscow. He was a consultant for the Lakers when he was in talks with the Kings about becoming the head coach then. He succeeded Mike D'Antoni years and years ago in Bologna. He's also coached Real Madrid. So lots of international. It would kind of fit the front office with Peja and Vlade. He also coached, or he's played a lot around Europe. Would obviously speaks Italian, so that's good for Marco. Maybe you can reinvigorate him. Was also around Marco for at least 1 year with the Spurs, so he would know kind of the way to get the best out of him, or at least had seen the best out of him. And I think that the nice thing with the Spurs is the way in which they brought talent out of nowhere, and they've changed their system so many times. Even the last 2 years, the 2 years he's been with the Spurs, they've changed so much from like a 3-point shooting team 2 years ago to this year where they're shooting so many mid-range jumpers, but it's still working. And so it would be kind of interesting. He has coached some games for the Spurs when Popovich is taking games off. So it'll be kind of interesting if he would be looking for a job. I know that he's also kind of rumored with the Nets having coached in Russia and their ownership. And he'd be another guy with obviously like a really interesting offense, more of the European style of like off-ball movement, and just like the defensive pedigree coming from the Spurs, I think is really intriguing.
Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned was internet, because I think we've seen Vladi. I mean, Vladi's done some international scouting. He's trying to establish an international connection. So I think that background and those ties together could fit as well.
And maybe the best player in the Kings range is, or in my opinion, for like the player I think they should go after is like a two-way wing player. So Timofey Luwawu, who's a French but playing in Serbia wing. So I think he would be a nice pickup if they're like 7 to 10. And so I think that would kind of fit that as well. And I think he's going to be 21 by the time the draft comes around, so kind of along the lines of Willie Cauley-Stein as well. We're a bit older. So I think that would be kind of a nice way to put it. Maybe if they move up a bit, they could get Dragan Bender, who's in Israel. So that would be maybe a black connection. He's like a stretch four. And he's pretty young. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting kind of if we see them move more European, and obviously they've got the Spurs pick as well, which is 60, it's going to be 59 or something. And so maybe they go for like a Euro stash or like someone no one's going to be really familiar with that they can bring over. So that'll be kind of interesting what they do with those two picks if they have the first pick. Is there anyone else, other assistants you want to talk about, or do you want to go into Messina a bit more?
Well, just don't forget about all the international rights players the Kings have the rights to, from the Isaiah Thomas trade and the Philadelphia trade.
They're all like 50 now, though, aren't they? They're just players that have never had their rights or like never retired because they've never played.
Yeah,
they're just fake names.
And so I'm trying to think of other names that were thrown out for Kings. Well, of course, there was Nate McMillan, the Indiana assistant coach.
So he got to the playoffs, I think, 4 times, 3 times with Portland, once with the Sonics. So not a terrible kind of pedigree. But I don't know much about him, but obviously not one of the sexier names. It'll be interesting kind of how involved he was with the Pacers' kind of change in style this year from last year. But that's also kind of like a positive thing where he's not maybe tied to one system, or he's seen like changing a system to fit players' skill set has worked beneficially. So maybe that's kind of fresh in his mind and would make him play to the players, which I think you kind of have to do in the NBA, where you have so little players making such huge impact. You have to play to their strengths. It's not like football where you want this. Personally, I think you should have the scheme elevate like players that can fit into the scheme, because you have so many. You have to have so many people that can be interchangeable. So if you have a whole NFL team built around one or two players, as soon as that player's not in the field, then everything's crumbles. Whereas in the NBA, although that happens, you can't really make up for that anyway, because it's just so much about talent. So I think that's kind of the key. So maybe that's kind of like the positives you've seen, like the couple of changes the Pacers have made and the success of that, and kind of takes that in.
Yeah. And
is there any other names? Or
yeah, I was just pulling up that. So, and this is Adrian Wojnarowski. So you mentioned Jeff Hornacek, Kenny Atkinson, and Celtics assistant. Have the name Jay Larranaga.
I think I've heard of the Celtics assistant being kind of talked up a bit. Who would be quite interested in the Bucks defensive coordinator as well. I think I can't recall his name, but he was with Kidd in Brooklyn as well, and he made that switching scheme work really well. They've kind of had to change it, and that partly because of the personnel they had, but it even worked with the Brooklyn Nets, who don't really have that same personnel. It's just it worked really well, that scheme. So I think he would be kind of interesting. And Hornacek, I'm not really sure about. I think he's a better coach than like the last year with the Suns, but maybe he doesn't want to go to another place where there's not that much stability coming from arguably a worse run team than the Kings and the Suns to go to maybe the third or fourth worst run team. At least from recent history. Maybe that's the only job he'll get. I don't know. So we'll see. But I don't really know. Like, it's hard to tell with him what he would do with DeMarcus Cousins. And obviously, kind of the players didn't really like him as well. So there's maybe some risk attached there. But what's your thoughts on Hornacek?
I don't know. I kind of feel like with him, he didn't get enough time in Phoenix with what they were doing. So I feel like
it was almost he was too successful too early.
Yeah.
But then
they were trying to tank, and yes, I mean he's an interesting one, and So I was looking at Laranga. One interesting thing about him, just he has an international background. Right, he's been the coach for a Ukraine team, along with working with Boston assistant. Also, and this I've always found these stuff interesting. Is he was one of the other candidates for Boston's head coaching job before they hired Brad Stevens, and they still kept him as an assistant. So I don't know. I think they have to be pretty high on him and for him to stay.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And then obviously Brad Stevenson likes him as well. Is there anyone else you kind of think or is there anyone you think is going to get fired in the next couple of days that could be interesting?
I mean, there's one thing that is with retreads is that you're taking on someone who, I don't know, they may not have, they'll want to prove themselves again, but like with an assistant coach, you may get a different type of fire, being able to prove themselves in the first job, like with Malone. But others who could be fired, we're not going to go for Byron Scott. Please no.
He might not even get fired.
Oh, please, Lakers, don't fire him. That would make my day. And then
they know their pick isn't protected next year, right? They don't need to tank next year as well to keep the pick.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, Nick's coach is gone. That's already 70. Is Brett Brown staying?
I'm not sure, but he would be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
He's another former Spur assistant coach, head coach in Australia, so like international knowledge. Um, I think he's obviously had like different lots of post players and lots of players maybe similar, like a very 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 poor DeMarcus Cousins in Okafor, but in style it's kind of similar. So he's kind of thought about how that works with trying to put shooters around that. Noel is kind of similar in like skill set to Willie Cauley-Stein. So maybe that could kind of be interesting. Whether they would take a risk on someone that has just coached so many losing teams, but he's a very positive coach. So yeah, I'd like him. I think I think it must have been, maybe it was a Zach Lowe or a Woj podcast with him on, and I thought he was sounded like was very like optimistic about a bad situation. So I think he might be used to kind of turmoil and be able to like cut through it and make the best out of the situation. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting if he does get let go of, and which is quite possible, you would think, with the kind of turmoil, the turnover they've had in the front office. What about adding Hinkie to the front office? Would you object to that?
I don't
McHale
know.
and Hinkie, and then you get two former Rockets in there.
I mean, I don't think so. I feel. I mean, Hinkie probably got more of a bad rap than because it was all trust the process. But I mean, how
I mean, he would help with the trading. He would help with like
yeah.
making the most out of the assets, and he'd probably enjoy building around a superstar. And with the Kings, kind of, they have lots of roster assets, but not kind of paper assets. So maybe if you can turn a Kufos into paper assets, if you can help turn maybe a Marco, or do something maybe with a sign and trade, because the Kings can do a little bit. They can offer Rondo, I think it's a 10.5% raise and keep him. It's like early bird rights, so they could maybe do a sign and trade with someone for him to get maybe another second round pick or something like that. So I think he would be, at least he knows all the minutiae of the salary cap and how trades work. So I think that would be like an interesting pairing, and they've obviously at least spoken on the phone before, considering they've done a trade, and they were part of that reported Bulls trade as well. So that could be kind of interesting.
Yeah. And there's one more thing on Brown, because like obviously the 76ers have a new GM. So like he may want his own coach. So
Yeah.
Brown, who knows? Brown could be out the door. Although I was just reading that I guess 76ers ownership absolutely loves him for
I don't blame him.
passion, player development, and yeah.
And then they might think, though, we're still kind of a way away, so we'll give him one more year of being bad, and then we get someone else when we're slightly better as well. But yeah, I think I'd quite like him as coach, and I would like Hinkie as well. I think that would be like a smart move, and like a buy low on like obviously a very well respected front office person. Should we move on to the draft pick?
Yeah.
What we think is going to happen with that? Obviously, tomorrow they're doing a freeway coin toss to see out of Denver, who I think Denver's pick is going to. I know it's a Knicks pick that goes to Denver. I don't know. I know they get the. Is it pick swap? I don't know what I'm reading. I'm very confused. But anyway, it's Bucks, Sacramento, and Denver are tied. So they're doing a freeway pick swap.
Coin flip, yeah.
Coin flip.
And we'll decide who.
And then when we get to draft lottery, unless I think so the Kings, if they get to 7, they can't. Or if they stay at 8, they'd need 3 teams, basically 3 teams to go to the top 3 places, which is
This is
pretty
possible.
unlikely.
Yeah.
It's possible. It's just very unlikely. And then obviously if they're in the 9th spot, it gets a bit more likely. 10th spot, a bit more likely. But the odds don't change a huge amount. It's still very long odds that one of those 6 teams from 11 or 5 teams, 11 till 16, can jump them. So who do you think, what type of player do you think the Kings should be going after? You think point guard, or would you rather go DC and Seth Curry and try and get like a wing or a big?
For me, I mean, granted, you have to see what type of coach they want to target, but for me, like, it's a fairly easy decision. I feel like we've seen enough from DC to where I feel confidence in him being a starting point guard. So it'd be a wing.
I guess you could go with like a Jamal Murray who can play some point and some shooting guard, and he's like 6'5", so he's got like some size where he can maybe play a small ball 3 as well. But it's not a great class for wings, I don't think, which kind of hurts. Maybe Furkan Korkmaz, the Turkish shooting guard, and he's like rail thin, but he's pretty long and young, so maybe he can build into that frame. So it'd be kind of interesting, but yeah, I think there's got to be probably another shooting guard. I'd rather it's kind of someone who can play the 3 more, and then you can play Gay and Caspi more at the 4, and just don't play Ben at the 3 anymore because it doesn't work. You can't play Marco at the 3 either, and I don't really think you can play Seth or DC at the 2. So that kind of makes more sense to have someone that can play shooting guard and then slide down rather than a shooting guard that slides up. That's kind of where I'm leaning. But I wouldn't mind Jamal Murray as well if he falls, because I guess most of the teams ahead already have their point guard other than Philly, but if Philly are going to probably be in a spot where they're going to take Ben Simmons or Ingram, so they're not really going to be going after a guard. So you'd think Boston, they've got plenty of guards. Lakers obviously have D'Angelo Williams unless they're going to trade him, which I don't think they will. Phoenix have 2 point guards already that start. Minnesota have Rubio and Levine, who Levine they keep trying to make play guard. Maybe New Orleans is the one team that hasn't got a guard they can really trust with Drew Holiday, but they're probably going to hope that he gets healthy next year. So maybe they'd rather invest in one of the other positions because they're going to need a wing. They'll probably need another big with Ryan Anderson likely going. Denver obviously had Moutier. And if the Bucks move up, they're going to be playing Giannis at point guard. So none of those teams that can realistically, and even if Orlando go over, they've got Oladipo and Peyton, so it'd only be if Utah were to jump, and then even maybe they wouldn't want to with Exum, but maybe if they think Exum will be coming back soon and strong, they won't move for one. So there's like not really any teams that need point guards, so maybe you would see Jamal Murray fall, and then that could be kind of a nice fit, or even like a Chris Dunn, who's again like older and not the same size as Jamal Murray, so probably can't play shooting guard as much. But I wouldn't mind them going for a point guard. I think Seth Curry's a bit overhyped just for what he's done the last month. I think he's like a good like 3rd point guard, but I don't think he's anything special. I think it's like fans got as excited about Ray McCallum, and we've seen he can't even get on a roster.
Hey, now Ray McCallum is doing quite well in the D League, I'd imagine.
I think he's on like 10-day contracts with Memphis, but I can't remember. So he's going to be maybe.
Hypothetically, let's say, and this would never happen, but hypothetically it does. Let's say Kings jump up and are number 3 in the lottery.
Oh, that's tough. Because you're missing out on the best player in Ingram. Ingram would be perfect if they can get to 2. But I think Jamal Murray would still be the pick, personally. Because you get like something the Kings have lacked is ball handling and being able to play with the ball in their hands. It's just, and we saw that like when they were using James Anderson and Marco Bellinelli as point guards at times, it was just awful. So Jamal Murray gives you like a shooting guard as well as a point guard. So I like that versatility, just another playmaker. Where would you be going?
I'm trying to remember if is it Murray who, because I was remembering an interview John Calipari did where he was talking about one of the Kentucky guys, and he just said,
He said Jamal Murray is like his best point guard he's ever coached.
yeah, okay, so yeah, it was Murray. He talked about how many sacrifices Murray made to the team, but he talked about how he said so many people were excited about Devin Booker this year, and he said like this guy Murray is just, as you mentioned, one of the best point guards he's ever coached. Just, I don't know. I mean, granted, that would be more John Calipari rumors, which would be so much fun. But no, I mean
the Sacramento Kentuckys.
Yeah,
let's keep it going.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I mean, granted, this is harping on the Kentucky thing, but I don't know. I feel like Boogie kind of relates to people from Kentucky, so and I'm sure he knows them because Boogie's been down there a few times. So having that connection there, I'd like it.
And then obviously Willie connection. Yeah, I don't think that hurts at all. And yeah, just maybe like if for whatever reason they really want to go for a wing, maybe Jaylen Brown. Haven't really looked at free agency in terms of wings. I guess Ken Bazemore, maybe he'd be interesting. Where you go Ken Bazemore and you get Jamal Murray, and then that's kind of like, I think you round out your kind of crop.
Do you want to talk about free agency a little bit since the season's over?
No, let's wait until maybe we get a bit closer to it. 'Cause I think we can do another one when we get a coach, and then we'll kind of know what the system's going to be and maybe where the draft pick is. Because I think free agency is so far off, and until you kind of, and plus I can't even remember who's a free agent this year. So it'll be mainly umming and ahhing, trying to work out who's a free agent.
So in the end, who do you think ends up being the Kings coach?
I really have no feel for it. I'm gonna go for McHale. I think they're just gonna go for someone proven who can relate to DeMarcus Cousins, but has also coached a modern way, worked with difficult players, and has always got like the good quality out of role players as well. He must have coached Caspi as well, so he knows Caspi, his time with the Rockets. Not that he got the best out of Caspi, but I think Caspi's developed a lot in that time as well, since being in Houston. So yeah, I'll go for him. I think maybe just like the former big man as well, relationship with Vlade and Boogie, there's like some synergy there. So I can imagine being a big man. Who do you think is going to be?
One more thing on McHale. I'm granted this is from a few years ago, but McHale's emotional message pushed Caspi to join Rockets, so they have a connection.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then I think if a coach has got Caspi's ear, I think that helps with Boogie's ear, because obviously we've seen how close Caspi and Boogie is. So I think that's like a huge way to get into that locker room core, because I think it's like the Gay, Boogie, Caspi, those players are really tight. So if you can get in with that group, I think that's a really positive start. And if you've already got the trust of one player, that's obviously very useful.
Yeah, I think Willie will really go. I mean, Willie will go for anybody who will actually play him, so he'll be happy.
Yeah, and he's been really fun to watch when he actually got to play minutes. So hopefully we get to see him play some more. So who's your prediction for head coach? And do you want to take a shot at assistant GM or whatever we're going to call the hire? I'm going to go for Hinkie as well. I'm going to go McHale Hinkie duo.
I think the assistant GM is just going to be the guy who they're in contract talks with, whose name is slipping my mind right now.
But you never know with Hinkie just being fired. Maybe that's what stalled it.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, for head coach,
package deal.
You know, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with Sam Atkinson, the Atlanta Hawks assistant.
Okay, that'll be fun.
Yeah, and I was just
I think
reading
that's like
about
the
him.
same mindset as like a Spurs assistant that's just Spurs East.
I was just reading ESPN about him, how many around the league praise him because he relates well to players. Works on communication, so I feel like that would be a big thing with Boogie. And they mentioned he's really good and focuses on individual player development. So I feel like he'll fit that and
Nice.
kill the interviews. And there we hopefully, who knows? We'll see.
And they have a
Just
fun scheme. They let the big men like play. They could maybe get the most out of Ben McLemore as like an off-the-ball shooter in the same way as like Korver plays. Lots of off-ball movement. Even if you keep Rondo, he's kind of similar to Schroeder in terms of the way they play, so they can use that as maybe Rondo off the bench. Not that I think Rondo would sign somewhere to play off the bench, but I think they would maybe get Rondo playing more deliberately, still using him to his strength, where you either get to the rim or you get into the paint and distribute it and don't just stand around for 10 seconds. So yeah, I think that would be like a nice on-court fit.
yeah. And one thing because you mentioned Bazemore as a free agent. Hey, maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah, just the way they've developed, like constantly get the best out of underperforming wings with DeMar Carroll before, and then Bazemore and even Hardaway looking pretty good. So maybe they can, maybe he would be able to like untap Ben McLemore's potential. It might take half a year. It seems to always take half a year with those guys, but then they turn into really useful players.
Yeah, so
that'd be another really great reason to hire him. So yeah, I think he'd be fun.
Yeah, so reading up on him, I'll go with him. You know, a little bit.
Okay.
Someone who's young wants a job, so yeah.
Yeah, I think I think it's either going to be they're either going to have to fall back onto someone like that, or someone who's maybe going to take their last job and relates with DeMarcus Cousins and Vlade, and like Vlade sells it to them. So that's kind of why I think Mikhail could be that kind of guy where maybe they speak the same language.
Yeah. So I think either one will. I mean, simply put, as long as it's not Mark Jackson or Vinny Del Negro, I'll be happy. Which is setting a really low bar.
Yeah.
Please don't disappoint me.
Very, very low bar. Okay. Well, is there anything you want to say, or should we just cleanse? We've cleansed our soul of George Karl.
Yeah, George Karl. And I'll just say this one more time and this goes to ESPN, and there will be a lot of reports coming out. A lot of George Karl was victim by ESPN guys. Everyone was at fault here. Boogie was at fault. The front office was at fault. George Karl was at fault. It wasn't the right fit, and now it's moved on. And now hopefully the Kings can get a fresh start and turn this franchise around as they get ready to go into a new stadium.
And hopefully Willie is free. Free Willie.
Free Willie.
Right.
Yeah, and with that, we will wrap up the Sac Off podcast. We are back. George Karl is gone. Free at last. Free at last. The Sacramento Kings are free at last.
The Wicked Witch of the West is dead.
The Wicked Witch of the West is dead. Thank you for listening.